little different M2 build here. One of the main points here is this power supply, which, I don't know if you can see it, but it doesn't have a fan in it. Welcome to Machines and More. In addition to supporting an mini-itx board, the versatile NCase M2 also supports an ATX power supply. So you just need to get the optional ATX bracket, which attaches to the top of the case and the main board, the side panel of the case. This 180mm unit that I have here is probably as long or as tall as you can go without interfering with the front I/O panel. And it's also fairly tight with regard to the cabling at the bottom. So I think this is kind of your safe length to stop at. This unit in particular is one that I've been waiting for. A big thanks to Cooler Master for sending us a sample to test. The headline feature here is that it's completely passive. There's no fan. The Cooler Master X Silent Edge 850 watt is a Platinum Plus rated unit that has multiple heat sinks to cool the power supply components without having to use a fan. This casing itself, you can even see here that it's designed to dissipate heat passively. And not only is it a huge bonus noise-wise, since you eliminate the fan and likewise the fan noise from the power supply, you also eliminate getting dust that could be trapped into the power supply, minimizing your cleaning from having that forced airflow through the power supply. The required orientation of this power supply does make for quite a few limitations though. Since it doesn't have a fan, it relies on existing air movement and convection to dissipate the heat. So this one in particular is intended to be mounted vertically with the vented face exposed to the open area in order to allow the heat to flow out the top of the unit right here via convection. Most ATX cases, they have a dedicated compartment to house the PSU with the fan facing downwards. Now, that's not ideal since, one, those boxes, they don't allow for much airflow other than what's happening inside the power supply, so whatever is happening through the fan itself. And two, it's not ideal for the vented fanless panel to face down because that's actually the wrong orientation for convection. Plus, it's not exposed to an open area where there's going to be some air movement. Now, there are a few exceptions for bigger cases, such as the Cooler Master's own Cube 500. But interestingly, it's MFF and SFF cases that will typically have a PSU orientation that's going to be ideal for the Silent X. Problem is, they're not always designed for an ATX PSU or simply dimensionally incompatible, which is where the NCase M2 becomes interesting as an option. So, could have built with the A3 mini-itx or Cube 500. And in fact, I do intend on doing that, but since I have been wanting to build with an ATX PSU in the M2 and the orientation here is perfect, I wanted to start here first. You have the vented side facing the open inside of the case here. There's a good amount of room here. And even though it's not able to face the cooler ambient air, such as if you have the vented M2 greater front panel, it's still serviceable. And of course, the position here places the exit panel of the PSU right at the top, where the unit has direct access to the ambient air. Building in the M2 with the Silent X Edge, because of the length, does come with a number of restrictions. For example, you can see here, it basically cuts off the GPU. So it's restricting the GPU length to 270mm. So if you do end up with fewer GPU options. A longer card like the 4070 Super Tough, like I built with recently, does not work here. Two, you do have a lot of excess cable to manage up. That happens to be universal ATX power supplies. They tend to come with cables that are for bigger cases. I was able to clean this up actually quite well. But custom cables would be the kind of a long-term solution if you do place an emphasis there. And of course, the orientation requirement means that an inverted build is not a reasonable possibility, at least in the M2 right now. But otherwise, the build process, it's not a whole lot different. I did go ahead and put the power supply in first because it's the biggest component in there, and I did want to build around it because of that. But I have to say, it's a really neat looking build. And the details with the grill and the panel here, the entire unit being designed around passive cooling, just really special. So quick note, with the M2, you do have to be careful of the screw length that you use on the front panel and mainboard interface on the back side there. One of those does have the potential to prevent the power supply from seating all the way through, so you're going to want to use a shorter one in that second position. Board here is ASUS's X870i. CPU is the 9800X3D. Got two sticks of Clev's 7200 MHz DDR5, so it's pretty similar to the Fractal Era 2 build I just did. And because of the restriction on the GPU, I switched to the 4070 Super Dual from ASUS, and that managed to fit with just about 3mm between it and the power supply. And even though we're not inverting this build, there's still plenty of airspace underneath here under the card where it can intake. So it's not as big a penalty as you might see with using a thicker card, because that's going to choke off itself. The Silent X Edge is an ATX 3.1 unit. The 12 volt GPU cable, it's a 12V 2x6 connector, and it feels much more robust than the 12V HPWR connectors that I've been seeing from other Cooler Master ATX 3.0 units, so the older ones. And this one absolutely clears the side panel. It's pretty close, but it clears. One inconvenience it faced with the stock AC cable is that the 90-degree bend actually goes the wrong way. So ideally, you would want to swap out to the correct one. 90 degrees the other direction would be perfect, but just for this quick build, I made it work with the stock cable here. So tidying up the cables, it's a little bit of a challenge here because there's a lot more than what you typically have with included with SFX units, but you can absolutely make it work. And there's plenty of points to kind of use as pseudo tie downs. These stock cables with this unit, they're actually quite soft and easy to manage up. So it has that sort of faux braided look like what comes with the Cooler Master Max case ensembles, like the Inner200B Max. Cooling the CPU here, we have the Noctua D12, which uses a single NFA 12x25, and I have it mounted in a rear intake in order to pass air at the power supply. Here, that's going to help with the air movement towards it. Even though it's warm air, it's still better than not having anything. And even with this big ATX power supply, there's enough space at the top to put two top exhausts, full 25mm thickness ones. I did lower the ITX motherboard down a few positions from the very top, and I'm using two Chromax NFA 12x25s as we're doing a very noise optimized build here. So it's kind of like a little game of Tetris here, right? So everything kind of fits together almost perfectly in these right angles. So it was very satisfying to fit everything together. When you fire this thing up, it's a completely different experience. It really does feel like you're missing something. And that's that missing absent power supply fan noise at the beginning. At idle, this thing is dead quiet. The Noctua fans are already whisper quiet. When you load things up, there's simply no power supply fan to let you know that things are getting hot in there, right? Many units, even featuring a fanless mode, that fan's going to kick up at a certain level of load. At low draws, idle, and things like word processing or web browsing, the hottest part of the PSU internals, I measure at about 36 degrees in a 20-degree ambient environment. So there's really no concerns there. Because the unit's housing is designed to dissipate heat, right? This whole heatsink section here is touching the front panel, and this is going to get warm under load. Still okay though, it's about 30 degrees when I measured it at in that scenario. For 1440p gaming, the front panel did start warming up to about 37, 40 degrees at most. With the internal heat sinks, they temped in at about 50 degrees max. So it's actually quite reasonable there, but this does get a little bit warm, so be aware of that. If you're curious how the D12L works with the 9800 X3D, it's actually rock solid. Full fan speeds, saw about 82 degrees here. Similar performance, basically all but identical to the Thermalright PA120 Mini, but with a much better noise profile from this fan. And for 1440p gaming, these times with the setup are excellent. So really nothing to be concerned about. I am aware there is a Chromax version of the D12L, and that would have been perfect in here with theme-wise, but I don't have one on hand right now, so I may update that in the future if I come across one. But you know, it works pretty well. No coil inductor resonance either from the PSU. It's an incredibly noise optimized system. Cooler Master has another model in this lineup, which is the higher capacity one at 1300 watts, which I think they call the X Silent Max, but it does have a fan. So if you want truly fanless, this is the one you want. I think 850 watts, it's going to hit most user needs at this point. If you're looking to do something like this with the M2, it's absolutely possible. Just be aware of the component dimensional restrictions. And I will say this is a very, very pricey PSU. The MSRP is $460. So there's a lot of high quality components in there, a lot of engineering, and I do get the impression this is anticipated to be a lower volume SKU. So it's definitely something to build an entire system around. Like, it sounds silly to build your system around a power supply, but this, you know, if you were to do something like that, this is absolutely one of those things you could. used for that purpose. I don't think you'll be disappointed in this unit at all if you see the value in a noise optimized system. So that's that. Definitely is one of the more enjoyable builds that I've done this year. Very, very fun to use, and definitely looking to test this out more. So if you enjoyed it, please give a like. Make sure you're subscribed. Product links are down below. Big thanks for watching.